All right, so our next speaker is a good friend and colleague and alumni of St. Lawrence University. Louise Harrison, she's with Save the Sound, and she's going to talk about the updates for the Plum Island campaign, a very important campaign. Thank you, Louise. And
hello, everybody. I have to say I'm just thrilled to see so many familiar faces, and many of you, at least, well, there were 58 of you in 2019 who participated in envisioning the future of Plum Island. So 58 of you participated in a whirlwind lunchtime exercise. It was an hour and 20 minutes exactly at Brookhaven National Lab, and we together envisioned conservation on Plum Island. And I want to thank you all for that because it's made a big difference in how we've proceeded since then. And if you like this graphic, this is done by Scott Bluedorn in East Hampton. He's an artist who loves wildlife, and some of the other art you'll see in this is done by him as well. I work for Save the Sound. We lead environmental action in the Long Island Sound region, fight climate change, save endangered lands like Plum Island, protect the Sound and its rivers and tributaries, and work with nature to restore ecosystems. Here's a view of Plum Island from the west, looking east. It was taken by a East Hampton Star photographer. And it's a different kind of a view. I'm just showing it to you because it's unusual to see it this way. You see the harbor where the laboratory people come and go. Over way on the left where it looks like a built-up area is the laboratory. The stripy, watery area is a wetland, freshwater wetland. And you see Plum Island leading off. If you can squint, you can almost see Great Gull, and in the very, very far distance, you can see Fisher's Island. This is 1.5 miles approximately off of the east end of Long Island and North Fork. What I'm going to do next is sort of spin through a bunch of slides quickly because many of you know that we've been trying to preserve Plum Island, all of you, and we, the collective we, have been trying to preserve Plum Island since 2008 when Congress first put it up for sale. But for some of you who are unfamiliar with it, I'm going to quickly give you some of the reasons why Plum Island would be of interest to people at this conference, and then go into the problem that we were trying to solve and where we are today. That's the update. The New York Natural Heritage Program identified 25 different ecological communities on this 822-acre island, and 5 of them were considered significant for their condition and size. So those were maritime dunes, maritime beaches, maritime bluffs, marine rocky intertidal shore, much like you had at Fisher's Island, and marine eelgrass meadow. There are actually 3 of these meadows at Plum Island. The 97-acre freshwater wetland has been looked at a little bit when the Heritage Program was there. They have a suspicion that it's a slightly brackish environment at this point. It certainly still hosts many freshwater wetland plant species, but there's much more to be learned about this. Save the Sound, through its generosity of donors, was able to send scientific divers out to the parts of Plum Island that are under the water in 2019 and 2021. The first dive was to characterize the bottom areas around the island, and the second dive was to try to begin to characterize the ecological communities that they found there and identify the species. What you're seeing here are marine sponges. You're seeing bryozoans that look like ferns. The sponge that's red, and then the white areas are northern star coral. A better view of the star coral here is the white fluffy looking polyps and the bryozoans on the left. I'm giving you the name of a YouTube video you can watch to get a lot more information about the underwater lands of Plum Island. These interact, and you're all ecologists and naturalists. You know how important underwater lands are to the terrestrial community and avian species, so I won't go into it. But we've been looking at all aspects of Plum Island, and we want to preserve it. This says 228. There might be 229 bird species that have been located at Plum Island or have been seen from Plum Island. And as you probably know, that's almost a quarter of all the bird species known in North America, north of Mexico, on 822 acres. So to me, that knocks my socks off every time. And the seals, the amazing seals of Plum Island. We have seal experts here today who have led trips out there. Thanks to Artie Kopelman, this photo of the harbor seals. Some people have seen hundreds of harbor seals hauled out on the rocks on the southern shore of Plum Island in winter. It's the largest seal haul out area known in New York State and one of the largest in southern New England. Also, gray seals are starting to come and be seen with the harbor seals. Right next door, the American Museum of Natural History, of course, has Great Gull Island, which has the largest roseate tern colony in the Western Hemisphere, and the largest common tern colony in the world. And that's because of the great work by Helen Hayes and her workers. She's not going there anymore, but Matthew Mail and other workers are still going and trying to keep the colonies alive. But this is what happened in 2008. This was a great affront to all of those who care about biodiversity. And this is why people started to organize. Some of the organizers of the Preserve Plum Island Coalition are in this room today, and we're all very grateful to you. Not only did the naturalists and scientists get busy, so did the town of Southold. Plum Island is in the town of Southold, although it's been owned by the federal government for over 100 years. But Southold realized that if the federal government was going to put Plum Island up at auction, it would be bought by a developer, because government agencies can only pay fair market value, and at an auction people would bid above that. So the one thing a town can do, of course, is set zoning, and that's what they did. And have you ever seen such bold zoning as taking a whole area and calling it the Plum Island Research District and the rest of Plum Island and calling it the Plum Island Conservation District? That is some bold zoning done by the smallest town on Long Island, perhaps not as small as Shelter Island. That's fabulous. They did all the planning studies to get ready for that so that it could be bulletproof if this should ever fall into the hands of a private party. Preserve Plum Island Coalition started getting busy and collecting signatures and talking to politicians and getting organized. And from the very beginning, there were monthly calls on the fourth Tuesday of every month as conference calls before we had the Zoom capability. And we're still doing it. So that was, now it's 12 years of every month getting together and planning how we're going to save this place. And we're up to 125 organizations now. But in the meantime, we were, after talking to politicians and trying to find out what we could do, we did go to Washington a couple of times, and we were told by Senate staffers, it's very nice to have this zoning, and we like the idea of keeping research there, and we like the idea of conservation, but that's not a plan. And we don't, as a federal government, we don't hold on to properties that have no use. So you need more than just zoning and this general idea. You need to plan. So Save the Sound and the Nature Conservancy pooled their funds, and that's when you saw us here in 2019. We were in our second of 3 workshops to hear from people about your ideas for the future of Plum Island. And we're very grateful. I have all the results. Everybody who filled out the questionnaires, the surveys, and sent their information in to us afterwards, we have retained all of it, and we've been using it. Thank you. This was at Brookhaven National Lab, Long Island Natural History Conference, lunchtime. 1 hour, 20 minutes, we got fabulous results. And in a nutshell, these are the results. I don't have a pointer, but I will try to direct you around this map. There are copies out on our table and in the brochures that you can pick up when you leave if you like. If some of this map looks a little familiar, there is the zoning in here. So you saw 2 sections before. This is now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sections. The section that had been designated for research zone, we still have that cordoned off. Below that is where the lighthouse is. We thought perhaps visitation to the lighthouse would be possibly in conflict with research activities, so we made it a separate area. The southern area with the wetland and the dunes and beaches, and the eastern area that looks like a tail, those are the areas we consider to be the most delicate parts of Plum Island based on all the information we have. These are parts that we don't expect to have people going very often. Perhaps someone with a research permit might go, or perhaps a person with particular interests might go with a guide. But we thought those areas were the most sensitive. And the central areas we sought where the old Fort Terry is and the parade grounds are, is the part that's been used the most over the centuries, perhaps the most durable. And we saw that as the place where most public visitation could take place. But public visitation was thought to be on a scheduled basis. The scheduling would be reliant on a management plan, which we don't have, but it would all be for long-term sustainability, as well as equitable access. This should not be a place just for people who have extra dollars in their pocket to come and see. And the reports are available online. One of them is outside on our table. You can pick one up. And the other is 72 pages, and the 72-pager has much of your input in it, as well as some more great artwork by Scott Bluedorn and a lot of photographs. We've had to change our ideas a little bit over time, but basically the plan is still intact. And this is it. We saw the Plum Island should be preserved for its ecological value, historical value, and its rich cultural heritage. But we still had this problem. This report came out in 2020, and Plum Island was still for sale. But as a result of your work and the report coming out in July of that year, Congress repealed the sale legislation. Thank you. Plum Island was not yet in conservation. So we got it off the auction block, but it's still owned by the Department of Homeland Security. Still activities going on there to decommission the laboratory and move out to Manhattan, Kansas. And then what? These agencies have been called upon for help, as well as we're hoping for co-management with the state of New York and these people. So never have I ever expected in my life I would be so involved in politics. But we are counting on these guys because these are the ones who helped us with the repeal. All right, so we have the 2 senators and from New York and the 2 from Connecticut who've been instrumental in getting Plum Island off the auction block and are still helping us. And now we have the House of Representatives getting involved as well. What we see and what we hope you will endorse and sign today before you leave for more information or actually write to the president is for our president to declare Plum Island as a national monument. We see this as the most flexible approach which can allow for ecological conservation, historical preservation, and the discovery and celebration of our shared cultural heritage. We hope you can do this right now on your cell phones if you wish. Text STS Plum, as it's written there, to 52886. If you can go to preserveplumisland.org and click the red button. Thank you very much. Thanks for your support. It's because of you.